And welcome to Bound by the Seam,
Yeah.
a BDSM podcast to discuss all the weird, quirky stuff that's going on in the various communities around. Well, I guess here and abroad would be probably the easiest way to discuss it.
Yeah.
Get some knowledge on some stuff. So, I guess we should just jump into this one because this one's a little bit more of a crapshoot.
Yeah, what is today's topic? Hold on, we got to start the episode proper.
Even I'm going to do it, right? There we go. That's great.
Yeah.
So, usually, on FetLife, whenever I get on there, there's usually a couple of reasons why I'm on there.
Uh-huh.
To look at the lackluster that is my mailbox, which is currently always sitting at 0, or see if any friends are posting anything, seeing any new rope photo shoots that are going to give me some sort of like ideas or ways to practice, if there's something new that I should be paying attention to. And occasionally something so stupid, so dumb, comes into my purview, and I want to read this. I screenshotted it because...
What came into your purview?
So there was a question asked.
Did it come with consent?
No, it didn't.
That's not good.
Yeah, no, usually not. So the question was asked by an individual, why doesn't our community have an elected council of elders?
Okay.
So that's a whole mess of shit to unpack. I can go locate the archives for it.
What is an elder?
I guess it'd be more in the not Gregorian sense, in the Gorian sense, because Gorian is a lifestyle where there's a hierarchy of all men are masters and everybody beneath.
It's a post-Greg society.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty accurate depiction of that. That whole concept is that there should be a group of people that have been in the community that are elder as far as like age is concerned, and as far as arguably skill set is concerned.
Are they talking age as in like how old you are, or age as in how long have you been in the community?
I'm gonna assume I'm gonna be an asshole about this. I'm assuming it's age.
Okay.
I'm assuming a lot of it's age.
So it's like this old, like, from what you said, it sounds like a patriarchal model?
Patriarchal model where it's a bunch of people that feel that they are far more knowledgeable in both age and knowledge to dictate how you should enjoy your kink.
Okay.
And not just enjoy your kink, but also...
how you're allowed to practice.
How you're allowed to practice, where you're allowed to practice, what are the do's and don'ts of this council of elders, and if it can get you banned. Basically, it's just a bunch of people trying to put their opposing views on people.
Okay, so how are we not doing that?
How are we not doing that?
Yeah.
Simple. Why would I want somebody in the sphere of, let's say, because I'm not a leather player, I'm not a leather person in the leather lifestyle. I'm practically just a rigger at this point. Somebody that is in the leather lifestyle may not know exactly all the little idiosyncrasies that come with being a rigger or a performance artist. Having them tell me how I should enjoy my kink is probably not going to work out that well.
Okay.
At least that's just my purview. That's like me trying to tell somebody that's in a slave dynamic how I would do it better.
Right.
And saying that what they're doing is wrong.
Okay. Because I think it's important to examine that, because we are also sitting here and telling people the basics of everything. Basics,
yes. Basics in our specific purview, because everybody's experience is going to be different. Everybody's lived experience is going to be different, and how everybody came into their kinky lifestyle is going to be different.
Right. And
we've said this before, and we'll continue to say it. We are not the arbiters of information. We just go say, hey, this is some information. If you want to do some more research on it, this is probably the way you can look for it. If you find a better way, please do let us know.
Sourcing is a big part of what we do, I feel.
Sourcing, networking.
Yeah, finding out who you can talk to.
Yeah.
Well, before we absolutely roast these people, I want to make sure we're not guilty of the same sins.
No. because this was brought up on the fact that, okay, there's a lot of new kinky people coming into the fray.
Mm-hmm.
One easiest example is that all of the people on TikTok that are they're joining kink life because it's so, if you scroll through the algorithm and everything, now I've started to see kinky people on my TikTok. Again, it's before it probably gets banned in the US. And it's interesting. You have a whole bunch of people that I've never seen out in like conventions and just talking about this stuff. So it's becoming a lot more accessible. So having varying degrees of information that people can pick and choose from is a lot better than having a group of, say, like the Council of Evil from DC, which is 6 people saying that they should be doing this specific way because that's what they feel is right.
Why do they got a fucking Justice League antagonist name?
Okay, fine.
Are they called the Council of Evil? Or did you make that up?
I made that part up.
Okay.
Because originally the DC thing is like the Sinister Six.
Okay.
And I figured that was like the funniest thing I can come up with in my head.
Okay.
Unless there is something.
Well, I would not be surprised by an elder group calling themselves something like that. Like, I've seen similar shit like this happening in some of the, like, the vampire subculture communities that are pretty prominent in Texas. I see, like, they have a lot in common with kink stuff. And I feel like the corruption that you're talking about, is it fair to call it corruption?
Well, it would be if it was implemented, because with any modicum of power, you're going to have some level of corruption.
Yeah, I've seen that dynamic active in like the Texas area and somewhat in the California area. So, while I'm not familiar with these groups that you're talking about, I think I've seen the dynamic before.
It's a very pervasive mentality where people don't like the concept of being held accountable on their own, so they like to shovel that shit off to somebody else.
Right.
More like a scapegoat. It's like, okay, well, now we have a higher power to answer to. Mm-hmm. They can take all of our blame, and they can take all of the shit that we're dealing with, because I don't want to deal with this shit on my own. I don't want to be held accountable for my own actions because was told by these group of people that what I was doing is correct.
Okay.
And a lot of that comes into like, and I don't want to throw a lot of like ageist shit in here, but I see that a lot with older crowds. Mm-hmm. Like, this individual is like mid-40s.
All right.
And you had this actually came across multiple different feeds in multiple different areas, and you just had a bunch of people ripping on the idea. And one of the biggest ones is like, there was a gentleman in I won't say specifically where, just somewhere north, that he's really predominant in his own community.
Okay.
Very predominant. Gay leather, like old school gay leather. Mm-hmm. And he made a joke about this, and it was like, well, you can't get 4 gay dudes to figure out exactly what we're going to be wearing for the evening. What the hell makes you think that we can have 4 people agree on a way to do kink? Like, that makes no fucking sense.
Okay.
And
why is the discussion happening in the first place? Like, what things about kink are needing to be decided? Because it sounds like it's more than just where do we meet, what time do we meet at.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that there's even before the whole pandemic thing, a lot of it is like there's been a lot of community divide, I guess would be the best way to kind of go about that. And nothing was really ever homogenous. Mm-hmm. You had areas in like Tennessee where one of the local dungeons there got essentially raided would be the best thing, because someone had a vendetta against the owner, wore a camera, recorded everything going on, and handed it to the police.
Wow.
So that place got shut down. Mm-hmm. And you have issues where there's a lot of consent violation going on in certain specific communities.
Okay.
And there's no one...
So it's like to curtail those issues.
It's to curtail those issues, but it's this misguided concept of trying to bring everybody together under people that they feel should give their definitive, like, this is how things should be. we as even as riggers, like there's a number. You can't find a single person that does a single column tie the same way.
Right.
You cannot. Everybody will find their own way to do something specific, and it just doesn't make sense because you have a bunch of, as kinky people, we're disenfranchised already.
Yeah.
Because we're not normal. As much as we like to pretend, we're not. We are slightly abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, we talked a bit about that on the last episode when we were talking about mentioning things about public play and mainstream acceptance and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, we are a subculture, and that's kind of the point.
Exactly, and the whole concept is like we're already governed by a lot of rules and laws and everything. Let's try to make this a lot less complicated. Do things safe, sane, and consensual, or in risk awareness, consensual kink, or even PRIG, personal responsibility informed consensual kink. Like doing these things should mitigate a lot of things. Like if you do not consent to something, then it's not going to happen. And these are like base level things that we as a whole have agreed upon. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. Like we have group leaders for riggers, we have group leaders for poly people, we have group leaders for edge players, and these are the people that have taken it upon themselves to try to educate more, but they are definitely not going to be the arbiters of information.
Right.
I know when I was teaching edge play, all I did was I brought people in that knew more on the subject than I did that I could ever do, other than doing simple research.
Right, and it sounds like our usual dynamic, from what I know of you and I, is it's either based on a location, and the authority in that location has all the power, or it's based on a group of peers, and whoever's the most experienced or skilled is the person that has the power.
Usually, yeah. Typically. And a lot of this came to a head where, like, the original post by the gentleman up north, he had to take it down because he apparently he offended people with the concept of, like, that is by far one of the dumbest ideas, is to have a random group of people that only a certain group would be completely in agreement to, and all these other people not necessarily being able to really do anything about it, because now you have these people that are dictating, okay, well, these places are good to go, and they follow all the rules, and if you go to those places, you're no longer part of the cool kids club.
Okay.
So it turns into this clicky nature that is already apparent because, again, you have all these people in various different forms of their kink, while some intermingle. It's not definitive. It's not an always.
Right.
And what is your opinion on the subject? Because I'm gonna actually look into the actual post a little bit more and see exactly how far it got, and we'll continue from there because it's fucking weird.
I feel like power dynamics in subcultures is a thing that is going to happen as a subculture gets larger and larger. But, like, it just doesn't seem like a good idea to be splitting into factions as a subculture currently, because the subcultures do that naturally already. So I just feel like it's a bad idea. I understand the urge to try and solidify some sort of power, because as you said, you usually see age as a factor, right?
Typically, age tends to be one of those weird factors where I've seen it in a little bit of a weirder sense, where somebody that is like mid-40s, early 50s comes in, and because of their age, a lot of people feel that they know more information in regards to it. In reality, they've only been in the scene for 3 months.
Okay.
So it turns into this weird vacuum of this concept that age means experience. But if you haven't experienced the thing that you just got into enough, what information other than your personal experience do you really have to be giving a level of authoritarian a power?
Yeah.
So it's weird. Is it right? I'm not sure. I mean, some people like that. Some people like that concept.
Yeah. Like, I'm personally at odds with most forms of authority. So there being what is effectively a kink governing body is not something I'm very down with. But I can see why people would like that. As far as having a structure to understand the subculture through. But I think we're starting to lose some of that, like, almost like cousin to punk DIY way of enjoying yourself. And I don't necessarily think that should be the standard. It is, also subculture about, like, a lot of the people like being told what to do. So a group of people that do that, yeah, that checks out, that makes sense. But I'm not sure, because it sounds like these people effectively decide they're elected, and then they use their clout to assemble a user base that a lot of other people, like, who gets to vote, who's pecking who, like, how do you get nominated?
There's a weird pecking order that gets decided, and a lot of them, and these are just some of the comments from this, and it's like, one of them is because we can't get everyone on the same page. Well, what page is that?
Yeah.
And
who decides what page we're on?
Exactly. And sometimes the other one of these other comments is like, sometimes those that could be elders would do despicable things, and then some peer leaders would support them and some would not, driving a big wedge in the community. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the biggest ones that I saw that kind of like stuck with me, is like, these people that you would eventually like come to terms with, be friends with, and you would fight tooth and nail to protect them if they did something shady.
Yeah.
It's happened in other communities. Like, there's been a number of large name performers, specifically riggers, mm-hmm. that have gotten caught up in some serious sexual allegations, and those aren't going away anytime soon. Mm-hmm. Now, did it ever go to actual authorities? Not my place to say. Those aren't my stories to tell. But there was such a divide because you had these people that would say, okay, this person would never do such a thing.
Right.
But then you have the victim saying, well, we have the receipts. Mm-hmm. This is how it happened. And as a matter of fact, there's video evidence of this performance.
Right.
So that's the same concept. It's like you put such...
So this is a thing that normally happens in situations where somebody's been victimized already. And now we're putting structural strength behind it.
Yep, pretty much. And it comes from... I don't know. I think it comes from just a weird place of just, again, wanting a scapegoat. Mm-hmm. At least in my opinion. Because if I'm not held accountable for my own actions, I would imagine that I would probably be a lot worse of an individual.
Right.
Not to say that I'm a good person. I'm just... Mm-hmm. That just seems like if I had that one little thing that was like, okay, well, if these people will back me, mm-hmm. what's to stop me from being a piece of shit?
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of it comes down to, is just there's this level of mistreatment when it comes to giving people power that you don't really know what their true intentions are, other than the fact that you meet them once a week at a kinky dungeon and you've seen them naked a couple times.
Right.
Because we never really know people until we know them. Mm-hmm. And it comes with a weird set of hypocritical notions.
Right.
And let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see. Ramblings on Fat Life about creating a camp of elders who would...
Yeah, how do you think kink leadership should progress?
Honestly...
And there should be no leaders
it's not a viable option.
Unrealistic, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, it'd have to be some level of homogeneity. You'd have to have everybody on the same page. And by same page, like, everybody agrees to these base set of things. Like, okay, we're doing things safely and consensually. Sexual assault is an instant ban. And you don't get a second chance. Mm-hmm. And if everybody can come to those same terms, and if you can sit there and say, well, your best friend just did something stupid, he has to go, you are you either back him or you don't, and if you do, you're also out because you're protecting your predator, there's a really weird set of red tapes that you need to start jumping through for that.
That seems like the same process we were just disagreeing with an extra step.
Exactly. And I can't even give you a definitive answer on that, because every time that I've seen a community, quote unquote, form, there's always somebody that's been given a leadership position. Like, as of right now, if I go on to FetLife, there's a group specifically for this community that is the community group leaders. Like, these are people that are in their respective groups. Let's say one of them's a rigger group. Well, this person is the one that says, like, okay, you are allowed to come to this group, you're allowed to come to these classes, and if you fuck up, you're gone. And it's like that with almost every single community, or quote unquote community group leader. You have that in the poly ones, you have that in the leather ones, you have that in the other ones. Like, that's how it's typically formed. And if you have a centralized place where all of these heads can come together, sure, that sounds like a passable idea, where each respective, I guess it would be organization at this point, because some of these places, some of these groups also run their own respective venues, that's where the basis comes from. If you have ownership of a venue and you run a group out of it, you're responsible for it.
Right.
And that's how the community kind of just like shovels that responsibility on. And that's what I've seen. When the dungeon was open down here, the dungeon was kind of the center point for all of the groups.
Right. And
the owner of the dungeon had the last say in who stays and who goes. So that one's a tricky one then. I don't know.
Yeah, because we're starting to get into a little bit of class stuff with that too, because that means you have to be able to run an organization, which means you have to either have the space or be able to afford to rent the space, or if you are an expert, you have to have the kind of economic situation where you can afford to put time into your craft instead of spending 40, 60 hours a week at a 9-to-5.
Yep. So this is where it gets murky. It gets very murky, because if you have the money to do it, you can pretty much do it.
Yeah. If
you don't, you're pretty much stuck following the lead on somebody else. It gets very messy, man. Like, and that's why I think I've seen a lot of the like bigger communities like fall, because right now there's several in this state that just don't exist, and they're small little fractions that where it's maybe 5-10 people, and that's it. And everybody doesn't like listening to other people, so they form their own little house parties,
right?
Which in turn are their own little groups, so they can have control over the situation, and becomes this fight for power, because they don't want to listen to these rules, or these rules are a little bit too strict. I want something a little bit lighter, and then you have this shift of people, and it becomes it's like an oil and water thing. You start seeing the separation almost immediately. So I don't know, if you want a community that has a group of leaders, form it yourself. If you can. If not, you can either stay home, and that's just kind of the way it is, which is weird. But
well, you should be staying home right now anyway.
Agreed. I mean, more in the sense like, if you cannot agree with the set status quo for the respective community, I don't know. Because right now, like even before this, like I've separated myself from the community as a whole. Like it's just.
I was more referring to the fact that there's a global super virus present.
Oh, that too. Yeah, that
maybe don't go out right now.
Yeah, just don't, please. For the love of God, please. I don't know. Like, this is one of those touchy subjects where it's like, you either do it or you don't. Because usually in conventions, you don't have that. You just have you can walk up to one of those experts that we were talking about that has mastered their craft and talk to them like a normal person.
Well, like, and if the convention isn't a kink convention, all you have to do is convince the people that are booking panels that you know what you're talking about, and you can present yourself as an authority to a room full of, like, wide-eyed, very curious people. Yeah, which is our target audience, so there's that.
With the little tales, too. Yeah, no, you can definitely pose as someone that is an expert in the craft, but what happens when one of the people in the audience calls you on your bluff?
Well, usually, a lot of those conventions, you have a lot of socially awkward people at them anyway, so you can probably just be assumed to be like, this is some naysaying, well, actually asshole that is trying to get some attention and some clout by yelling up at panels, because you usually have, like, at least one or two of those people in a lot of panels that I see at these events.
That's fair. I mean...
And I don't think they're, For the kind of person I'm referring to, I don't even think they're nefarious most of the time. I think that they were like, well, my field is a meritocracy where I can prove myself with how smart I am. So to be respected, I have to perform intelligence.
You have to
Performing intelligence is telling people they're wrong, because that's what we were taught in high school. Like,
yeah, I think this is going to lead to an even bigger question as far as like the kink, like a kink community is concerned. Like, what dictates it, other than the fact that it's just a bunch of people that want to get together and have a fun time? Like, I think that was originally the concept. We have a bunch of people that are completely separated from social norms that just want to have fun. What would be the point in having somebody dictate what is right and what's wrong?
I think completely separated is a misnomer, because I feel like there are social norms, they're just different.
Yeah.
And there are allowances for things. So, like,
you're allowed to tie somebody up and beat them, but you're not allowed to rape somebody.
Exactly. You're not allowed to be a creep unless you've, like, stated that, hey, my thing is I'm being a voyeur. Is that cool? And people are like, aight, that's cool. Or they're like, don't.
Yeah, usually. As long as you ask, you'll get an answer. Usually. It might not be the answer you want, but it'll be an answer nonetheless. And, I don't know, communities are difficult as far as, like, kink is concerned, because I've seen a lot of weird infighting. I've seen a lot of this, a lot of that, and it's not to dissuade anybody. It's just that's the nature of humans. We have disagreements, and then zipper clicks form, and then that group grows in numbers, and then they have an infight, and then another group forms from that, and it's a cycle. It is. You'll have like 50, 60 groups in one state that just don't agree. I think there was one time there was a statewide TNG thing. Like, TNG is the next generation. Essentially, you have to be from the ages of 18 to 35.
Okay.
And once you hit 35, you're obviously out. And I think it was a one time where everybody within that age group had gotten together and actually did something. And I think there was like over 800 kinksters.
Nice.
And it was the first and last one I had, because there was a lot of problems that came with it.
Right.
And that's when you realize, and it's also a regional thing. Like, how we do things here is not how some people do it over there. All in all, this conversation sparked a lot of controversy as far as like, well, why we already have a set of checks and balances. Like, just don't be a creep, follow the 3 little acronyms, and just be nice.
Well, what is checking those things?
Usually the venues.
The venues? Okay, so then that means the venue has all of the authority.
Essentially. It's the same thing with a hotel at a convention. If any of the hotel will ultimately tell you if your convention is causing problems, like the rooms are destroyed because all of these people came in and just screwed everything up. You have the buyer's den where nothing was cleaned up and everything was left to trash. The hotel can tell you to go fuck yourself.
Right.
And that's the same way it is with most. Especially,
but the venue, like, if we're talking for like conventions, the venue is not the convention, so they can check and balance on each other. True.
The convention can also check its own patrons. It can check who allows as a panel, back and forth, so on and so forth. And I think like the small little private venues, like there's what is the it's we'll just go with Studio Kokoro, the one in the UK. They have every right to tell you to leave because it's they pay for it. They have the money for it,
right?
And it goes without saying that typically we let them decide, because again, it's their space. They created it, and they created it for a specific purpose. You violate that purpose, you're no longer allowed.
Right.
And I think that's where this comes to kind of a head, because what would these people own if nothing? Like, do you have maybe 3 venues here, and all of them are operating on way different wavelengths.
Right.
So, as someone that's owned a venue before, it's usually a pretty cut and dry thing. Where it's like, you don't be a creep if you want to come back and you want to learn. That's the whole purpose.
Well, and like, who can hold the venue accountable for its own thing? Like, let's say we've got a shady venue operating like how we suppose that these elders may operate, right?
Right.
And you go to the venue and a consent violation happens, but they go, that would look bad if it were proved right. We have to quash this. Like, a venue is just as capable of that as any of these groups are.
Very true. And a lot of that has to go, and I think a lot of that's going to go back on, like, I have said community so many times. It's annoying that at this point it's the community that needs to...
Thesaurus.com.
Pretty much.
Well, if the center of the authority in the community is the venue, and the option is have kink or don't have kink, what are people going to pick? It sounds like...
people will have kink.
If this... I don't want to say council of elders, but if there was a overarching group that could be like, hey, we don't go here anymore. And like music scenes, actually. Before the shutdown happened, sometimes like music scenes that treated bands badly would get a reputation for that. So the only time you would see people at those venues is if those bands really needed money. And people would only go for the bands, and people would stop showing up to the venue just because stuff was there. Like, there's a couple of venues here in town that I will go to, like, let's say it's a Saturday night when the apocalypse isn't happening.
Yeah.
I'll just go to the venue because I know whoever they booked is going to be good. And there are others that I will only go to if a band I know is going there. And that's because you have these people that curate for the community, and they're very open and transparent, but they don't really hold authority positions. So these people would be like people that book shows, photographers, the Current. Well, used to be the Current, not anymore. That kind of thing.
Is it now the past tense?
Do what?
Is it now the past tense, not the current?
I think the Current still exists. They've backed some stances that, like, I didn't disagree with. I was like, oh, that's kind of weird.
That's fair. Apologies. Nicotine fix.
I feel you.
There's... Funny enough, there's been a lot of that, actually. There's been a... Well, this place has people that we don't like. We're not going to go there anymore. That's exactly what happens. And people will separate themselves from it. Or you have the better half that just don't want to deal with it, deal with the larger issues, and just still go and be a patron at these locations.
Yeah, I think a problem is a lack of a communication structure that is neutral, I guess you would call it, because FetLife always has this air of people are looking for hookups or ways to start scenes most of the time, which is what the website was built for, so of course. But I think people don't really see it as a place to get news from other than where events are occurring.
Yeah.
It seems like you, leaving a bad review on a venue in FetLife is very different from leaving a bad Yelp review or roasting somebody in the paper.
Or even canceling somebody on Twitter.
Yeah. It's everything that happens on FetLife is incredibly personal, which means you can't be you're going to have a much more political battle than you would otherwise.
Yeah, the battle of ideologies is a very strong one when everything is an identity, a personal attack. That's true. And we don't really have like a larger kink news outlet.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen one.
Well, and you have a community that prides itself on how personal it is capable of being.
Yeah. Individuality is a very, very big thing as far as like you can be yourself.
That's kind of a problem when someone's being a shitter.
Exactly. Well, and then it goes into, well, this is just who I am. Well, who
you are sucks.
You are a shitty person. You really should have passed the vibe check before you were allowed here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes with intrinsic bias, because we all have our perceived, like, who we will talk to, who we won't talk to, who will trigger a very visceral, like, you're going to catch a hand appointment,
right?
If you continue talking, and it just turned into this weird mess. And I think a lot of that just comes down to a lot of individual personalities just don't really mesh well with everybody else.
Well, the older a community gets, not community, but like the older a subculture gets, the more access to the mainstream it gets. And I feel like as the kind of people who are coming into kink are less and less marginalized, there is more allowance for this kind of clickiness that we see.
Yeah.
Because for better and for worse, we're losing the we have to protect them just because they're in the community.
We're also losing the veil of mysticism as a subculture in general. Like, if you think about it, like, the more and more it gets far more predominant in the mainstream, the more people discuss it, the more, like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a Twitter post of some girl going, choke me harder or something like that. Just like, it becomes a lot more of a discussed topic. You start removing a lot of the mysticism behind it about, and I think people that it also depends. It's a generational thing too, because there are people that got into kink from the Book of O or The Secretary or 50 Shades of Grey. And now we're seeing it with TikTok or anything of the sort. And there's even people who read up who the Marquis de Sade was and like, ooh, that sounds really weird and kinky. That sounds like a great idea. And those generations have very specific thought processes about how kink should be. And when those differences of opinions come into the same room, you get a lot of heated discussions. So we'll see what happens in the near future, but as of right now, thankfully, there's no such thing as a council of elders that's going to be actually put into effect.
That's good.
And the fact that a lot of people actually, like, got behind the idea of, like, yeah, no, this is not a good idea. Leave it to the venue to decide, and leave it to and sometimes the council of public opinion is kind of important. Sometimes it can be very toxic, but as long as we can avoid some sort of, like, authoritarian stuff, I think we can get by just fine without it. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times this conversation has come up, like, in the past 6 years that I've been in public kink. So many conversations, and it always ends the same way. Well, who do you think is going to run it? And usually they mention a few names, like a couple months later, oh, this person had a sexual assault allegation.
Right.
That was probably a really bad choice. So, oh God, this topic makes me so tired every time. So tired. I also think it's a little bit more of the, like, pandemic is finally weighing in on, like, the level of just nothing going on. Yeah. And you're starting to see a lot of people just regurgitate the same information.
Yeah. I have plenty going on. That may be the difference is I'm super occupied. But I feel like a lot of people have already gone through that. Right? Yeah. Like, they've found a way to keep themselves occupied. They burned all the way through it. And now I'm just, like, throwing myself headlong into so many things.
I think with the little bit more of, like, the incorporated schedule, like, I'm just going to throw myself into this and just focus strictly on everything for this and this alone, because this is getting some decent traction. I like it. It makes me a happy boy,
right,
to see people actually listening to this and just hopefully doing the best. At the moment, that's about all I wanted to discuss on this topic. We were originally going to have a guest with us, but plans change, things happen. As it goes. Is there anything else you wanted to add at the end of this?
Just social structures and political power between small groups is a complicated thing. I feel like a lot of people approach this like from the lens of, well, there's this very simple solution. You just do this. And I think a lot of people don't realize that like that equation has 400 different variables and it's different for everybody.
Yeah, that's very true. What we think is simple is probably not for someone else.
Yeah, I don't think it's simple.
Yeah.
Like I have this teacher who I won't mention their name, but they have this idea that if you think something is simple, if you really understand it, you can make it complicated. And vice versa is also true. If something is complicated and you really understand it, you can make it simple.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, at the moment, again, that's all I have to say on the subject.
Yeah.
Don't forget to follow us on Pornhub, YouTube, wherever you'd like. This will be posted up after the previous episode, after I get done editing it. I do thank you for your patience. And Auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, Jeanette.
Yeah, comment what y'all think about all this. Because I know normally when we get to the end of our rants, we're like, this is what you can do in this situation. But right now I feel like we're just two people on a balcony yelling at a theater. Like
Yeah. No, this one's gonna take a lot more time, by all means.
What should we do? Be tired?
Be exhausted, like the rest of us. No, definitely. I really would like to see what people think about this subject, because this is not an easy topic. Obviously, considering we're both here, just like you can hear the frustration. Like, this is not a good idea. But again, someone might prove me wrong and get me on board of the whole council of elders. Maybe not, but we'll see what happens.
I don't want that kind of responsibility.
Neither do I. I really don't.
That sounds like it would cut into my sleeping time.
There's a lot of things that cut into my sleeping time, and
you don't have sleeping time.
Exactly. Because everything's cutting into it. Well, that's it.
Bye.
See ya.